Today, what I wanted to sort of zoom in on, focus on is um, at the founding of the modern state of Israel in 1948. And again, let me just back up for a second. Obviously, we're all thinking about Israel, and Israel is on our minds all the time. Just thinking about Hanukkah in the context of what's going on in Israel today. And what I wanted to do was to take a look at the first Hanukkah after the establishment of modern day Israel in 1948. And what we'll see is secular and religious basically proclaiming that this is the continuation of the Maccabees. That in 1948, with the establishment of Israel, the Maccabees have continued. So I don't know if you have studied, if you were there, if you've thought about it, if you learned about or seen the pictures. Do you know what was sort of in Israel in the early days, in the 40s and the 50s, how did they kick off and start the celebration of Hanukkah, besides baking sufganiyot all the time?
They didn't teach us that in Hebrew school.
So we'll do some screen sharing. Find where we are.
I was going to Heights Temple Sunday school then.
Yeah.
I remember learning the songs in assembly with Cantor Meisel.
There we go. Do you see the picture?
I see a picture.
All right, what's the picture of?
A torch.
A torch, yeah. What does it look a little bit like?
Olympic torch.
Olympic torch, yeah, exactly.
She has a wreath.
I'm sorry?
She has a wreath on her head, I think. Or is that hair?
I think it's just hair, but I'm not sure. Here you can see, here's another one. So as you can see from the note here, right, male and female runner bear the Hanukkah torch lit at Modi'in, the ancestral home of the Maccabees, carry it on foot. They jogged it, they ran it to Jerusalem for the official lighting of the national menorah. So interestingly, right, for many years, I don't think they still do it anymore, but they, in Israel, starting in 1948 with the establishment of the modern state, they would light a torch at the home of the Maccabees, from 2,000 years earlier, right, and run it across Israel to Jerusalem to light the national Hanukkah in Jerusalem. Thoughts, comments? What does that evoke?
They want to be like, remind you of like Greeks, the ancient Olympic Games, they've been in the land since ancient times. Yeah,
it's interesting because that's like who they didn't want to be in the Hanukkah story, right? Right, so they didn't want to be like that, but there's this whole, Zionist torch bearing running for the lighting.
Well, maybe they're taking the custom and owning it for themselves with their new state.
Definitely making it for themselves. Yeah. So, and they would pass by special places, just like I'm sure they do with Olympic torches, right? They go by, heads of state, and they go by, historic places as they made their way and wound their way through Jerusalem for this moment. So number one, I just wanted to show you because I thought it was really interesting. Now we'll take a look at what David Ben Gurion said on the first Hanukkah. Find it? Yeah, I have too many windows open. Here we go. Okay, someone want to read this? This is the account of what happened on the first Hanukkah in 1948. Now, Sherry, you want to read it?
Sure. The festival of Hanukkah was celebrated in Israel last night with a relay race in which torchbearers started out from the ancient Hasmonean center of Modi'in, passed through Ramlah, where Israeli military governor Ziv Yavetz and Jewish children in the town cheered the runners, and proceeded to the home of President Weizmann in Rehovot. The Israeli president came out of his house to greet the torchbearers. Taking a torch from one of the runners and holding it aloft, he declared, "After 2,000 years, this is the first Hanukkah in the Jewish state. Again, the Maccabean spirit rules over the country, which is small, but has, I believe, a great future." From Rehovot, the runners continued on to Tel Aviv and made their way to the great synagogue here. The first Hanukkah candle was lit outside the synagogue, but the Hanukkah celebration continued outside Maccabee House, where the World Conference of the Maccabee Sports Organization opened earlier. Premier David Ben-Gurion, addressing the opening session of the Maccabee Parley, declared, "We are living in an era when the Egyptian exodus is taking place in reverse. You are meeting with when Israel's armor continued the Maccabean fight for liberation and independence."
Right, I want to just make a note. The War of Independence, the war actually isn't over yet. You know, they fought into 1949, right? This is December 48. So there still is war going on as this is happening. Here, you want to finish up?
Professor Selig Brodetsky, world president of the group, said that the Maccabee movement should serve the Zionist movement and the entire Jewish people throughout the world. Delegates from more than 20 countries are attending the parley. The Israeli post office is stamping all mail dispatched from the Maccabee meeting place with a special commemorative stamp.
Okay, so, right, it's interesting that they combined the Maccabiah, right, which we know still happens today, right? We send delegations to both where it happens nationally and to Israel of our usually teens, but it's for all ages. I remember a couple years ago, we have a member of our synagogue that was in the masters or the senior set that competed in the swimming, right? So again, this interesting sort of mashup with really the idea of what the Greeks were, which was physical prowess. So comments, thoughts about the words from Chaim Weizmann or David Ben-Gurion?
It's interesting that they're doing a major celebration of Hanukkah, which I thought in Israel. I didn't know whether that was universal or just American to compete with the Christmas season.
Mm-hmm.
But apparently
in Israel, it is the reclaiming of Maccabees, of the Hasmoneans, right? The Maccabees are the military strength. Right, makes sense.
But for what I was told was a minor holiday, that's really a nice major push for it.
Really a nice major push for it.
Yeah.
It was our holiday first.
Yeah. Oh, Sharon Eric. Yes.
Sharon Eric.
Yeah, I think the word rededication comes to mind first. Even though it's a minor holiday, I think for Israel, it's something. It's not the religious aspect; it's the fact of rededicating our homeland. If this took place in 1948, I think that's what it means.
Yeah, very nice, right? So it's a little hard to hear you, and there's a reverb. So if you could mute yourself.
Yeah, we're saying that it's a way of rededicating the land as a whole. I mean, President Weitzman was saying after 2,000 years, we're back.
Yes, got it. Right, so instead, I'm gonna mute you guys now. So instead of the rededication of the altar, right, and the religious significance and of the Beit HaMikdash of the temple, this is the rededication of the land and the nation of Israel. Thank you. Actually, that's what that was a good segue. Thank you. I think there was one other text I wanted to take a look at, if I can find it. Here's one other version of what happened. This is from the chief rabbi of the IDF from 1948. And he gave a speech on Hanukkah in 1948. So, Sherry, I'm going to put you to work to read his speech. It starts right here. If you can see the mystery of the miraculous victory.
Yep. The mystery of the miraculous victory of the few against the many is the most perfect expression of the strength of spirit when faced with oppressive military might. Not by might nor by power, but by my spirit, said God. Thus and only thus were the many able to fall below the few, because the few knew what they were fighting for and for whom they were prepared to die, for the purity of faith in the word of God, for the Torah of their God and the land of their forefathers, for human freedom and spiritual release from a foreign culture, and for universal justice that had been in grave danger. Before our very eyes, the great miracle of Israel's redemption happened again. With the reawakened spirit of the Hasmoneim, we conquered our holy land, army of Israel. Holy soldiers of the War of Independence and Renewal, Hanukkah is your holiday. In you the spirit beats, and in your hearts is a holy burning fire taken from the altar of God. Light the candles of freedom, carry torches in the cities and the villages, in the bases and the outposts. Carry with you the command about going to war to those standing at the foot of Mount Sinai. You shall not fear them, for the Lord your God goes with you to fight for you against your enemies to save you.
Comments, thoughts? What do you think this means to us today, this year, right now?
We're fighting again.
We're definitely fighting again, right? And though Israel's army is stronger and larger, there's also fighting against the rising anti-Semitism across the world. Yeah, Sharon, Eric, do you want to say something?
Yeah, we were just saying, as before, we hope we're not fighting alone.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to mute you just because there's a lot of reverb. Yeah, and I thought, again, this, towards the end, before our very eyes, the great miracles of Israel's redemption happen again. We're awakening the spirit of the Hasmoneans, army of Israel, holy soldiers. Hanukkah is your holiday. In you, the spirit beats. In your hearts is a holy burning fire taken from the altar of God. Here's again the transition from the altar. Light the candles of freedom. That's, I think, what we're thinking about right now. Carry torches in the cities and the villages and the bases and the outposts. So I thought this was pretty moving when I read it and wanted to share it with you. Okay, comments, thoughts before we do a little shift?
What are we shifting to?
Oh, I mean, we're still talking about this, but yeah, looking at a different text. Yeah.
Yeah,
So yeah, go ahead.
Well, I'll be honest with you. I don't know. I'm getting uncomfortable with it. I mean, it's this thing that it's holy and it's by God and all that, and I don't know that I agree with what's going on now.
Are you saying the fighting now, or like what,
Yeah, the more I read, the more it's like, especially, resuming after, it's one thing before the ceasefire, but after the ceasefire, like what, stuff I read is, first of all, it's, getting rid of Hamas is unrealistic. And we want the hostages back. That's not going to help them. So I have a lot of trouble with this now.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, the question is what does Israel need to be secure? Right. I mean, I think that's the quite right. There's two different things. There's what's going to bring the hostages home, and what's going to make Israel safe again and the border towns safe. Right.
Okay, I don't want to get too off topic for you and
Yeah.
stuff, but is it okay if I say something else?
Yeah.
I just like one column I read by Thomas Friedman. I don't know if you read his column about. He said that he thought that Israel at this point should just announce that they will stop fighting if they release all the hostages. Release all the hostages, they stop fighting, and then start dealing with things there. And I'm thinking maybe that's the right thing to do, because they are, obviously a lot of stuff has to go on after that. But at this point, killing more. I mean, I don't know too. I've read that Hamas may have up to 40,000 people in it. They're not going to be able to kill all of Hamas. If they have to kill, 50,000 civilians to kill, 20,000 Hamas members, that's not. I'm not comfortable with that.
Yeah, I don't want to argue with you. Obviously there's a lot of devastation in Gaza. There's a question of there's no differentiation in the numbers reported of civilians versus terrorist militants, right? There's just this general number, right? 15,000 or whatever,
Right.
whatever the number is right now that's being reported by Hamas. So obviously, it's not pretty, and there is loss of life, right? It's just that question. And again, I don't want to get into arguments, right? But there are also testimony from the hostages that have been released show that, hostages were taken to hospitals or to things, and, nothing really was spoken about. Right. So just a question of, like, how do we determine when there's enough when there's enough safety for Israel? It's problematic. And I know that where the operation is right now, right, that they think that that's probably where some of the hostages are being held. So it's a difficult thing.
It is, and I worry so much that, as soon as they, if that's where the hostages are and Israel starts fighting there, as soon as they get close, they're going to kill them. I mean, that's why it's just like.
It's difficult. Yeah. It's a no-win situation right now. Right? And the mastermind of October 7th, right, was someone who was released in a prisoner exchange, right? So it's very complicated. Right? Right. What we hope is that the leadership that is making the decisions are people people that we trust, and that Israel trusts them.
That doesn't seem to be the case. I'm sorry, I was going to be quiet, but I mean, that's
okay. Yeah, no, it's.
I mean, that all the stuff I've seen is that.
Yeah, and then we'll get back to text. But yeah, I listen every morning to the Times of Israel Daily podcast. And I recommend it. Everybody's got their Israel media, I-24, or or Haaretz or Jerusalem Post or whatever everybody goes to, Ynet. But I do Times of Israel, and this
Times of
morning,
Israel, is that, I'm sorry, you say Times of Israel? Is that what
Times
you
of
do?
Israel. Yeah, it's a
Okay.
website, and they do a 15-minute update podcast every day. And this morning in the podcast, they talked about that. Then we'll get off of politics after that. That the defense minister and the prime minister gave back-to-back press conferences, not together, and that's not, most times it doesn't happen, right? So it's a question of, where the leadership is. And, Benny Gantz is also part of the leadership right now, and he's got a very high approval rating. So it's sort of be interested to see what happens just with the Israel leadership over the next couple of months. Just hope that they're united. That's the most important thing right now. Okay, so if I can shift, Bob, did you want to say something before we shift?
Yes. I'll start with a question. How many different times in the Torah does it say that God is giving us all the land, to the north, the south, and the east, and the west?
A number of times. I don't have a number, but at least 4. Yeah, probably a lot more.
So the members of Israel society who believe that the Torah is the word of God and that there is no alteration to that it's God-given and that's what we obey. So therefore, there is no compromise in giving up land. And then you have Hamas, and it's...
By the way, can I pause you for a second?
Sure.
We're not going to get there, but what I wanted to do, if we have time, is there's this great book which is sort of like the Bible on Hanukkah from Noam Sion, who, as you know, he was a scholar. He taught at the college here for a year. He was a visiting scholar from Israel, and he had the Haggadah, A Different Night. He put out a 2-volume Hanukkah Bible called A Different Light. And he has an entire chapter, and that's what I really wanted to go through, which was how early Zionism and the early leaders of Israel, took on and saw this as Maccabees as a continuation. In fact, Herzl writes his last line in Herzl's book, The Jewish State, which is like the primer, on early Zionism, right? This is his last 5 words. The Maccabees will be resurrected, right? So he saw the formation of a Jewish state as literally the resurrection of the Maccabees. But what I was going to say is that the last thing that Noam Sion has in this chapter is that the settler movement, the early settler movement in the 80s, around the following the giving back of Sinai to Egypt, they took on the persona of the Maccabees, saying that we shouldn't give the land back, that it's all of our land. And in fact, some of them were even arrested because they caused a lot of harm, let's just say. And they all their announcements were always on Hanukkah, that they took on Hanukkah as their thing, right? That the entire country should be theirs, and they were the next Maccabees. Go ahead, sorry.
So we have that on one side, and on the other side, you have people that say from the river to the sea.
Yes.
And somewhere there's got to be a solution to that when you've got one side that says this is all mine and the other one says, well, it's all mine too. And
Yep.
we're going to fight it out and see who wins. And that's where we're at.
Yes. Well, I'm probably too simplistic, probably too optimistic, probably too naive. Are there any moderates, right? Are there any moderates to talk to?
I'm sure there are.
Yeah. Are there any moderates that have any voice, that have any power right now? No.
No.
No. Right. And right.
They should start saying Kaddish for all of the people who are hostages.
Well, hopefully not Kaddish for hopefully they're still alive, but they should pray for them. Yeah. By the way,
No,
here's
I
my
think-
segue, and I'm gonna do my. I guess I'm like getting some royalties from Times of Israel, but they've been doing profiles of both hostages and profiles of those murdered, and that every day they do several of them, and they've actually done 300 profiles of the 1,200 that were murdered so far.
I think if they say Kaddish for the hostages, it removes a bargaining chip for Hamas.
I didn't understand what you were saying. Yeah.
We assume that they are dead or they're going to be dead. Now let's talk.
Yeah. The goal of this was actually to study Hanukkah, but we got sidetracked. Yeah, I actually was reading, another person I read, not that I always agree with him, but Daniel Gordis. And he sends out a daily email. So if you're interested, you can get on his daily email list. Again, I don't always agree with everything he says, but yesterday his email was basically Israel got all the hostages they're probably going to get. That it's, and that's it. He actually, again, it's not him. He brings different thinkers and then he presents them. He presented which I don't agree with, which was that Israel shouldn't have done that. Again, this isn't him. He's bringing different writers and thinkers and opinion pieces, and that Israel gave Hamas too much legitimacy in the world through the hostage release. All those images of the hugging and the stuff which they were forced to do. I mean, number one, most of them still have family that are hostages. Right? These are not, they were still coerced and fearing their lives or fearing their families' lives. So it's very complicated. Okay, enough about that. Can we get a little less serious? Is that okay for a moment? Okay, so you might know there's this classic argument within the rabbis about what is the miracle of Hanukkah, and a question of in Hanukkah, are we celebrating the Maccabees' resiliency, the Maccabees' faith, the Maccabees, the Maccabees and you sort of human inspiration and going against all odds, or is it about a nace? Is it about a miracle, right? Which of course the focus is on the oil, that the oil lasted for 8 days, but also just that actually the military victory wasn't about the Maccabees, but it was about God behind it. So you might know the song Mi Yimalel. Are you familiar with that song? Okay, so we're going to take a look at a couple of texts. Let me find it. We're taking a sidetrack here, if that's okay. Okay, this was an interesting source sheet, which we're not going to look at now, but we're going to just look at a piece which is actually telling the history and story of Hanukkah through 9 songs. We're not going to look at them all, but we're just going to look at Mi Yimalel for a second. I gotta find it. Okay, here we go. Right, so here's the song that you probably know. right? Who can retell the things that befell us? Who can count them? In every age, a hero or sage came to our aid. Hark, Shema, in days of yore in Israel's ancient land, brave Maccabee led the faithful band. But now Israel must as one arise, redeem itself through deed and sacrifice, right? So who is the protagonist? Who is the savior in the song Mi Yimalel?
Judah Maccabee.
Right, Judah Maccabee, the Maccabees. Where's God in this?
Not there.
No God, right? No God. Let's see. Yep, that's a song. Okay, just making sure. Okay. All right. Now we're going to look at the Bible, if that's okay for a second. Psalm 106 from the book of Psalms from King David. All right, Sherry, you want to read it in English? You'll see they skip a couple verses.
Yeah. Hallelujah. Praise the eternal, for God is good. God's steadfast love is eternal. Who could tell the mighty acts of the eternal, proclaim all God's praises? Nevertheless, God saved our ancestors, as befits God's name, redeemed them from the hand of the enemy.
Okay, who's the protagonist in Psalm 106?
That one's God.
God. Okay, if you're a Hebrew reader, take a look at the top bolded thing after the bet. Mi Yimalel Gvurot Adonai. Almost the same, right? Mi Yimalel Gvurot Yisrael. Right? Who can retell the mighty acts of Israel? Who can retell the mighty acts of Adonai?
God.
Interesting. So what do we take? Like, what's the song doing? Right? What's the song doing versus the psalm?
It's giving credit to the Maccabees, to the people.
Yeah, more than just credit, right? It is taking a biblical psalm that is a foundational statement, right? That God's might is the reason that we were saved from our enemies, right? And taking literally the same quote and pulling out God's name and putting in people, right? Israel or Maccabee, right? Depending on the verses, right? Kosher? I mean, I guess so, because we sing it all the time. It's one of our favorites, right?
Is that similar, like, isn't it on Purim, that God's really not mentioned in the narrative is helping, it's all the people?
Yeah, although there it's understood. Yeah. Yeah, there it isn't like a question, right? So, right, Glenda, what you're saying is right. In the entire book of Esther, the Megillah, right, that God really isn't mentioned. Yeah. God is understood. But here it's this, like, I don't know if the paradox is the right word, but yeah, there's like, is it all human motivation, human determination, human grit, right? Optimism, faith, or is it faith? Or is it like, was God behind all of it? I mean, yes, the answer is Purim and Hanukkah are considered sibling holidays. And by the way, there's a third sibling holiday that gets merged with it, which is Yom Ha'atzmaut, right? Israel's independence, right? So, in fact, the same prayer is added to the Amidah for each of those three holidays, Al Hanisim, for the miracles.
Do you know when Yimalel was written?
I didn't look that up. Let me see if I can find it.
I mean, it's modern, isn't it? I mean, it's not.
I have to look that up. Yeah, Ma'osor is old. Ma'osor is old. Mi Yimalel, I think, is more modern. Let me see. Good old Rabbi Google. Hold on. If I had the other version, This book, it's a 2-volume. If I had the other volume, it's sitting on my desk at home. It actually might tell me that. So I might have to get back to you, but let me see what
I don't need the date. It's just, I was thinking, that it sounds like then that would be something modern that people don't feel comfortable ascribing miracles to God as much as they used to.
Yep, here we go. Yeah, midnight 1950s-ish. Yeah, or maybe like right around the founding of the state, by Menashe Rabina, a Zionist communist and music critic, according to this is actually from a colleague of mine, David Seidenberg.
It secularizes it. It takes it out of
Oh, definitely 100%. It's all secular. Yeah.
takes it out of the synagogue and puts it in the general population.
Yeah. Yeah. So I wanted to show you like this sort of exemplifies this question and distinction of who are the Maccabees, what's their motivation, who's behind them. So if we jump, if that's okay, back to this, I want to look at some of the other early sources of the original sort of Hanukkah in Israel. So here's another one of these. This is the streets of Jerusalem. Remember we saw that opening picture with the torch relay? The streets of Jerusalem, right? All the kids there, like these are, torches, or, huge candles that they're carrying.
Looks like Boy Scouts.
Yeah, it might be the Scouts. Yeah. Scout movement is very strong in Israel. Right? Israeli youth movement. Yeah. This was from 58. Right, so here, sorry, it's a little, I copied, so it's a little angular. By traditionally, Passover has been the holiday of national liberation, its family observance and exclusive emphasis on God's supernatural redemption could not serve the Zionist slogans of auto-emancipation. If I do not do for myself, who will do for me? Yitzhak Ben Tzvi, Chalutz, an early pioneer, and second president of the state of Israel, right? It's in 1911. The glory and educational value of the Hasmoneans as their example revived the nation to be its own redeemer and the determiner of its own future. Those were the Maccabees. The Maccabees revived the nation to be its own redeemer and the determiner of the Jewish future by themselves. Not with God. Right, secular. These are secular people. And this is actually what Eric and Shira were talking about with the rededication, right? And how they took the idea of rededication and made it secularized. And actually, originally, they changed the name. They didn't call it Hanukkah so much, but they called it the Festival of the Hasmoneans, Chag Hashmonaim. The early Zionists changed the name in that way. And if you know the story of Herzl, do you know that Herzl was very famous for the Christmas tree he grew up with? I don't know if you know that. And actually, I remember I was in Berlin about 12 years ago, and at the Jewish Museum in Berlin, they have a recreation of Herzl's Christmas tree. And so he actually writes about, he wrote a piece called The Menorah, where he gives up his family tradition of the Christmas tree and takes on the menorah as the image and as the ritual item that's going to sort of fuel his desire to create a Jewish state. Right, what is it? A great light streamed out from the menorah. The eyes of the children flashed. What a good friend saw was the kindling of the light of the nation. Right, so for Herzl, the menorah is a really powerful image and model. Okay, where did I want to go next?
I just missed a big chunk of the class, but I kind of wish it was the menorah that was on the flag rather than the Star of David.
He actually, in this book, also Noam Sion writes about the debate of what the image should have been for Israel, right? Menorah. Why do you think the menorah, Ron?
Well, the menorah is more of a it's a longer standing and more, to me, a more Jewish symbol than the Star of David. I mean, we call it the Star of David, but the 6-pointed star goes way back before that.
Yeah. All right, Eric and Sherry, you unmuted, so we're getting a reverb. So why don't you guys talk? Go.
So that's why.
Yeah, so we visited Italy a while ago.
They certainly, I mean, they didn't put a Star of David in front of the Knesset. They put a menorah in front of the Knesset.
Put a menorah, yeah. Now, what I was going to say was when we visited Italy, and the Vatican, you know, they're the catacombs or whatever. There are Jewish burials underneath there, right? And the way that they know that they were Jewish is because there is a menorah symbol. So yeah, you are right, Ron. That the menorah is a more ancient symbol. I don't know. Can't argue. Star of David.
I don't. I mean, it may not be more ancient, but it was more Jewish.
That was the more ancient identifier of Jews. Sorry. Yeah, I clarified myself. Thank you. All right, where did I want to go next? Hold on. Okay. Yeah, Eric and Sherry, you can unmute.
I just have a quick question.
Yeah.
I know we're on the road. There was a time, I'm not sure you talked about this maybe previous years, about the translation of Al Hanisim. It's in the Siddur, about what the reference to miracles is that time or this time or all times. That's something that I'm not sure if I'm on topic here, but I do remember that. It's the Al Hanisim is referring to the miracle that occurred just at that time,
Yeah.
or is it more broad?
I'm going to mute you. Oh, you got it. Thanks. Yeah, it's a good question. It's actually general. It's a general question as about what was Hanukkah a once and only miracle, or is Hanukkah still happening? You know, or is the miracle still happening? And I'm not going to give you a good answer, but here's the answer, which is, you know, if I was better technology, I could throw this on the screen share, but hold on. I'm gonna do the non-technological way and show you my phone. Again, I'm sure there's a way to cast this onto my computer, but
there definitely is a way to cast that to the computer.
Yeah, I know. If you can see my screen, oh, it's hard to see. It's not as clear. But Bayamim Hahem Bazman Hazeh, this is the pictures at the temporary Israeli IDF camps. The temporary IDF camps where all the reservists are have huge banners that say, Bayamim Hahem Bazman Hazeh. We will win. Hanetzach Yenatseach. Right? It doesn't, if you understand what they're saying is that I'm gonna unspotlight myself, right? What they're saying is, again, the current situation is seen as an opportunity where we need those miracles. And
What did it say below the people? I mean, there's a couple words below.
yeah,
I couldn't tell.
that's Hanetzeach Netzachim. That's we will be victorious. Actually, it's Am Hanetzach Yenatzeach, right? The people will be victorious together. I'll send you the picture. It's from a colleague of mine that's on a solidarity mission right now. He put it up this morning. So really what I wanted to do, and there's this question, sort of this debating of what the miracle is or isn't, and we were going to look at more things that in the early 1900s, through the formation of the modern state of Israel, the removal of the sort of the religious part of it, as we talked about, and that the songs, a lot of our classic Hanukkah songs, go and talk about the military might, because those are sort of from the formation of the state of Israel in the 40s and the 50s. And the focus was that Israel, modern day Israel, is the resurrection, the continuation of the Maccabees, and military strength, and the need to protect the people and to form a state. So that's sort of song after song of many of the songs that we do. And by the way, in Miyam Alel, there is what we translate as hark, Shema, Shema Bayamim Bazman Hazeh, right? And there's a whole play on why does it say Shema there? Like there are other words for hark, in military or whatever, if you're saying, they don't say, when they say listen up, they don't say Shema. Right. So again, whereas they took this really classic line from Psalms, right? Who can retell the strength of God, right? The might of God, and who can retell the strength of Israel, right? Where they recast that again, they took the word Shema, which obviously is our core statement of belief and faith in God, right? And that, right, we put everything behind God or for God, right? And they took that word and they turned it in the song, which is about, Israel's military prowess, and removing the God piece out of it. Yeah, Bob.
Am I unmuted? Yeah. It's interesting that in Israel they had the torch parade, and now we have Chabad with the menorah parade.
Yeah, that's a different thing, which I wanted to talk about at some or maybe next class. But yeah, I'll get there in a second. Judy, did you want to unmute and say something?
Yes. So in my opinion, yes, maybe the menorah is older, but at that time it goes along with, because Magen David, the shield, the whole doing at that time when it was established, it goes along with Gvorot Israel, the strength. So they were thinking about overcoming it with might rather
I like
than.
that. Yes, thank you. And obviously, we didn't say this, but really for the first many years until 1967 and the Six-Day War, those first 19 years of Israel, I wasn't alive yet, but right from everything I've read, like it was precarious. Israel's survival was not clear, right? And right, military strength, and that was not only needed, but it was it needed to survive, not just to protect the people. So it was really important. So I wanted to bring up one last thing for discussion, which gets to what Bob was saying. Why is this menorah parade happening?
You mean the Chabad menorah parade?
Chabad menorah parade.
I think it's for pride in being Jewish. By the way, we're stopped, so hopefully the noise is gone.
Yeah, better. Yeah, better.
We're
Okay.
supposed to spread the light
Spread the
of
light.
Hanukkah.
I'm gonna mute you. We got a reverb. Oh, thanks. So, yeah, what we're gonna study next time maybe is, or something else Hanukkah, that the reason that we light the menorah, there's a lot of reasons, but the rabbis in the end say this phrase, persumi nisa, to publicize the miracle. It's important to publicize the miracle, to share the light, to show people why we are celebrating, right? That we're bringing more light, that the oil lasted for X many days, 8 days, or, right, we're publicizing the miracle, right? And that's the idea of both Jewish pride, but also the menorah parade is the ideal way to publicize, to drive through town with a menorah on top of your car, right, is the best way to publicize. And not everybody's going to pass your house and see the little, see a menorah in the window, or if you have a little display out front. But if you're driving through multiple cities, that's really publicizing the miracle. So
have we decided, oh, sorry. Have we decided which, is it the miracle of the oil or the miracle of the fighting? Which
that we haven't decided. The rabbis haven't decided, by the way. They're not sure either. Yeah. So what I wanted to bring up for the last thing is that there's several colleagues have been pushing this thing called Project Menorah. I don't know if you've heard about it. So Project Menorah is asking our non-Jewish neighbors and community to put a menorah in their window and light it every night as a sign of solidarity.
I have heard about that they should
Yeah,
have the
so-
menorah with their Christmas decorations.
Yeah, so what do you think about it? Yeah, what do you think about it?
I think it would be lovely.
did that start? I mean, before this movement, wasn't there something where there were some Jews that were being harassed or discriminated in some place, and so the Christian neighbors started. It was around Hanukkah time, and they started also putting up Jewish symbols so that
Bismarck, Montana. I heard about that some time ago. I think that's where it was.
Bismarck? Okay.
What if
this-
we're
is
asked
this
to show our support for Ukraine by putting up a Christmas tree?
Yeah, well, that's different. Yeah. I think it's different, but it's a question, right? I guess what Bob is getting at is, right, are there other ways that our neighbors can better support us than by, is it with an Israeli flag? Is it with, they're the hostage signs? Is it with, are there other things? Or, as Sherry said, is it just a really nice thing to feel supported and feel solidarity and feel that we're being included, right? Like it's a questionable thing. There's a lot of pros, but there's also some other questions.
Yeah, a lot of people get upset, the whole thing about appropriation too.
Yeah,
I mean, that's
I know.
So
A lot of appropriate.
I think I would be a lot more comfortable with not using a religious symbol, but to use a secular symbol.
Like the flag.
Whether it's the flag or something else, I don't know.
Yeah.
I like the flag that's half American and half Israeli.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, that's part of the reason, I've been debating whether we should be publicizing it or not, or sharing with my colleague, the Christian colleagues, is I'm not sure. I would definitely want their support and continued support, right? But is putting a menorah out, and I've seen within my colleague circles a question of whether it should be lit or just there,
Mm-hmm. Is this supposed to be like a one-time thing because of the situation now?
Yeah, because of the situation now. But also, I mean, like even right before COVID 2019, there was that was really the beginning of the huge rise in anti-Semitism a year after Pittsburgh. And if you remember, the rally was in January 2020. That was in New York, because there were several attacks in the tri-state area around Hanukkah, including, if you remember, the rabbi in Muncie, that his home was attacked, right, during a Hanukkah party. Yeah. So
I also
just
have
wanted, yeah, go ahead.
I have concern over Christmas decorations and candles sharing the same space.
Yeah, right, that's, it's a question. I wanted to bring it here for discussion. And does that do, again, if we're gonna get to like what the rabbis envision, that the menorah's job is persuming Nisa, is publicizing the miracle, right? Does asking non-Jews to put up a menorah publicize the miracle, or is it a sign of support, and is there maybe something else that can be a sign of support?
It's also pretty limited, it's like, what, they're gonna support us for 8 days and then.
That's true, right? We need support more than just these 8 days. That's true. Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you for studying with me, and we'll do session 2 about Hanukkah next week on Monday at noon on Zoom. All right, have a good week, everybody.